Qatar is a slave state. FIFA knows that Qatar is a slave state. The sponsors of FIFA know that Qatar is a slave state. The sports associations, the fans, the players, in huge numbers, are telling FIFA there can be no World Cup in Qatar without workers' rights. They have called to have the vote rerun if necessary, if Qatar won't listen. And when FIFA tells you it has no power, it has the ultimate power. The Qataris want the World Cup. We've told them repeatedly for 3 years, if they demand workers' rights, the freedom of association to have a collective voice against this squalor, and that's the least of it. Because if you're a poor migrant worker, you go to Qatar with a contract, you'll find it's often torn up and you pay less than half of what you were told in your country of origin. You will have paid illegal fees just to get that privilege, sometimes up to $2,000, money that none of these families can afford. So they beg, borrow it, it's there over their heads. But they go because they're desperate to help their families. And then when they arrive and their responsibility for accommodation is in the hands of their employers, they find that actually they're totally owned by one other person, their employer. Because the state of Qatar takes no responsibility. So the employer houses you in squalor. They pay you whatever monies they choose. There's nobody to test contracts that you often never see. And then, of course, they force you to go to work. You can see the buses scramble any time from about 5:30, 10 to 6 in the morning. After those sorts of conditions, and that's a small camp, it's the conditions, though, that exist in the majority of the camps. We've been in camps where you have 300, 450 workers, and 20 grown men will scramble for a bathroom in the small amount of time they have before they get ready to go to work. And then they go to work, and they work in extreme conditions in the summer. Temperatures you can't imagine, 50, 60 degrees. They come home, often late at night because they're forced to work 8, 10, 12, sometimes more hours a day, 6 days a week. They cook in those conditions, unhygienic, unhealthy food. Often the cooking facilities are right next to those squalid sanitation arrangements. And when it comes to drinking water, the same applies. Jamie told you about the fact that the sewage is pumped out. Well, you only have water in tanks, and if people choose not to fill it, or if they fill those tanks with, indeed, in one camp we're in, salted water, then that's your lot in life. This is not a way to live. If you treat grown men, the indignity of treating your brothers, your fathers, your sons, your uncles, anybody you know, 8, 10, 12 to a room with bunk beds, no recreation facilities in 99% of the camps, and then when it all gets too much, when it's all too much, you can't leave an employer who abuses you, or you can't leave the country. Trapped in Qatar is not a story. We know it's not a story. Journalists know it's not a story. But it isn't just poor migrant workers, and there are overwhelming numbers of them, 1.4 million migrants. Now with bringing forward the deep water port, in addition to the infrastructure for the World Cup, it could be 2.4 million within just a few years. But it's not just those poor migrant workers. We've helped footballers. You've seen some of the cases around footballers trapped in Qatar. We've helped television producers and other executive television experts. When an employer in Qatar, whether it's a Qatari employer or indeed a Western company or a company from other parts of the world, says they're not going to treat you with any dignity or any respect, you have no recourse to justice because you are in fact owned by another individual. That's slavery. The IOC has now put a criteria for international human rights and obligations, that includes labour rights, into their 2020 plan. FIFA refuses to talk about the issue. There is a current presidential election. We fear that it'll be business as usual. The corruption is so strong. And what happens with the system of corporate greed that exists in Qatar is it corrupts our companies back up the chain. So today I give you 2 points. One is the Qataris could fix this. This is not about poverty. This is actually the richest country in the world. This is about greed, pure and simple. The Qataris see these people as less than human. And that's why we have a slave state. But indeed, the companies who are in Qatar don't have to deal with workers that way. Construction companies, hotels, retail, they could treat their workers in exactly the same way as they treat them here, in Germany, in France, pick a country, but they choose not to. And when the Qatari authorities could do 4 simple things, and they won't, you have to ask, why not? They could allow freedom of association, so people could have a collective voice against that treatment. They could put in place a minimum wage. There's a current system of apartheid when it comes to minimum wages. The Nepalese are usually paid less, although now some of the African nations are taking that spot. And when there's no minimum wage, there's no labour compliance. So the court system can take you 2 years or more with, of course, no capacity for representation for poor migrant workers. We retain lawyers, but I can tell you the system is stacked against them. And then if they put in place an end to the kafala system, whereby they choose to allow proper migration arrangements, so you're not trapped in Qatar, you're not owned by another individual. That's all they have to do. Countries would help them, we would help them, the International Labour Organisation would help them. Qatar chooses not to. So today I say thank you to Jamie. He knows as a CEO that this is a big stand. He accepts responsibility for his own company arrangements, and that's no less a moral code than we're asking other companies to follow. So this is indeed a groundbreaking day. Companies can join the We're Not Sponsors of Qatar collective, We're Not Sponsors of FIFA collective, because they know that in fact Qatar is a slave state. So Jamie, thank you.